Lecture 29, we call it Contemporary Democracy. Let's characterize democracy for a moment. It's from the Greek. It means rule by the people. In practical usage, it's a system that allows the majority of the people to vote and to participate in politics. There are no practicing democracies, as this would be mob rule, essentially. There are practicing republics, like the United States and various other nations around the world. The United States has long been a strong advocate of democracies in its foreign policy. And again, by democracies, the United States is promoting representative government, republics. Old systems were displaced by democracies. Empires have, for the most part, passed away. Monarchies belong to the past, mostly. You still see the king, or the queen, rather, in Great Britain. You still see some Middle Eastern kingdoms with monarchs. Nationalism and strivings for independence fatally weakened empires and monarchies in the 18th and 19th centuries, or 20th centuries. Republics appear to be the preferred form of government in the modern age. 20th century options? Well, we had fascism in the early first part of the century, both in Italy under Mussolini, and of course Nazi Germany under Hitler. We had a variety of totalitarian regimes, communist and otherwise, in the Soviet Union, in Red China, North Korea, and Cuba. All of these, of course, communist regimes. Fascism, of course, was destroyed by the defeat of Germany and Italy in the Second World War. These totalitarian systems differ from democratic republics in that they do not tolerate dissent or pluralism, that is, more than one authority or more than one political voice. Democracies are not always successful. Mexico flirted with democracy but reverted to a one-party rule. Weimar Germany after World War I lasted, 12 years until it became Nazi Germany, a fascist rule under Hitler. Of course, Mussolini's fascist regime in Italy was destroyed in the Second World War. The Versailles democracies in East Europe were destroyed by Hitler and Stalin. You'll remember these. The Versailles Treaty created a number of new, small, weak countries. We talked about self-determination. Czechoslovakia, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Austria, Hungary, Romania, and so on and so forth. Traditionally, landlords in East Europe have supported totalitarian governments in suppressing the peasants. Democracy also failed in Japan during the first half of the 20th century. Democratic forms of government did survive, however, and showed the great power, the ability to continue to manifest themselves around the globe. Democracy in the post-war era, that is after World War II, notable successes for democracy and for U.S. foreign policy in both defeated Germany and defeated Italy and Japan. So all three of the Axis powers evolve after the war into successful democratic republics. India, during the Cold War, will become the world's largest democracy. Democracy, however, is suppressed in Red China, the Soviet Union, and other totalitarian states. Latin American nations have tended to remain authoritarian, military-based governments up until the 70s when this begins to change. In the 70s, there's a new surge of democracy as these representative governments take root in Spain and Portugal and Greece. Democracies flourished in South Korea, in Taiwan, and the Philippines as we move into East Asia. Now, in the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev introduced pluralism and the market economy into the centrally planned communist state. This was called glasnost and perestroika. Gorbachev's reforms, ironically, led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev meant these reforms to enhance Soviet power. He kind of let the genie out of the bottle and couldn't get it back in. Could not control the forces that he had unleashed. Democracy has not taken its root in Russia, however. Elections appear to be, how should we put it, rigged. A shift towards democracy in sub-Saharan Africa, also in Indonesia, Ukraine, and Georgia. Why is democracy so successful a form of government? Well, it's encouraged by the core, the great Western industrial powers, West Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, and other places. They provide a good model on how democratic societies function. President Carter's emphasis on human rights, this began in the 70s in the Carter administration, and it has become a watchword and a way of critiquing societies based upon the treatment of their populations by their governments. Western democracies no longer defend imperialism. An apparent link seems obvious between democracies and economic prosperity. So these are factors in the success of this particular form of government. Where is democracy unsuccessful? Well, China's decision to rejoin the market economy in 1978 was not accompanied by democratic reform, only economic reform. The Chinese Communist Party remains the only legitimate authority in China. Chinese Confucianism and democracy do not mix, perhaps because of the hierarchies. Democracies remain the exception rather than the rule in the Middle East. Do Islamic traditions work against democracy? There was a push in that direction over the past decade with the so-called Arab Spring that you may remember. Keep an eye on Turkey as well. Turkey's long been a democratic republic, a member of NATO. Turkey is kind of on the edge at the moment. We'll have to see which way it goes. So let's draw some conclusions here. Do we have a cause for optimism with the spread of democracies? What about the internet? Do personal computers encourage democratic ideas? Will increasing number of democracies prohibit war? Are democracies less likely to go to war against each other as they share many of the same values, a part of the same economic system, part of the same sort of cultural apparatus? So is conflict going to be lessened as democracies spread? Will democracies work together to solve environmental problems? These are open-ended questions. We don't know the answers to them. You saw recently President Trump pulled the United States out of climate agreements. So it's difficult to know what the impact of this is going to be. So these are things to keep an eye on, but these are the type of topics that we deal with in world history where we look for broad patterns and connections over time and space. Thank you.